Welcome back to the Ink Sutra, your eternal sanctuary, where the ancient, dusty echoes of the East meet the velvety quietude of the deepest night. I am the Ink Spirit, the silent scribe of your subconscious, the witness to the intricate, shifting patterns of your soul as they ripple through the dark. Tonight, we open the most significant, heavy, and profound volume of the Panchatantra, the Mitra-bheda, which is the book of the severing of friendship. Now, if our Sunday tales are like a thick, heavy blanket of mountain snow meant to bury the sharp noise of the day and bring you into a dreamless, cold hibernation, then our Wednesday sessions are more like a flickering, golden candle placed in the center of a vast charcoal hall. This flame doesn't startle your senses. Instead, it gently illuminates the shadows of human nature, making the complex simple and the restless still. Tonight, we ask you to put aside the masks of your social world, the titles you carry, the smiles you force, the strategies you plot to survive. Just watch the golden ink as it begins to swirl in the dark, pitch-black void before you. It traces lines of liquid fire against a backdrop of eternal charcoal, much like stars being born in the inkwell of the universe. We're going to be exploring the authentic, tragic, and deeply wise tale of Panchatantra, the Lion King, and Sanjeevaka the Bull. It's a story of how the most golden, resilient bond of trust can be dissolved, atom by atom, by the slow, acidic drip of a single, cunning whisper. So, let the story begin. Before we journey to the ancient, humid, and whispering banks of the Yamuna River, let us ground ourselves in the absolute, unmoving present. Close your eyes. Feel the weight of your body pressing into the mattress, becoming as heavy, as ancient, and as unmoving as a moss-covered banyan tree whose roots reach miles deep into the cool, dark earth. Throughout your day, You have been a vessel for the strategic whispers of the world, the hidden agendas of others, the subtle manipulations of the marketplace, and the relentless, grinding noise of competition. These are the modern Damanakas that clutter the soul and tire the spirit. For the next few minutes, imagine those external voices not as words, but as a thick gray smoke. Watch it being slowly washed away by a cooling, persistent rain of liquid gold. Feel the warmth starting at your temples, moving gently behind your eyes to relax the focus of the day, and flowing down like a slow, honeyed river into the very center of your heart. Breathe in, drawing in the velvet clarity of the night air. Breathe out, releasing the echoes of other people's intentions, letting them fall away like dry leaves into a bottomless inkwell. You are the master of your own inner silence. You are the soul shepherd of your own peace. Let the golden ink settle your spirit, quieting the tremors of the mind as we step together into the ancient forest where the king and the wanderer first met. The story begins with the merchant Damanaka, a man of great ambition whose life was measured in the clinking of coins and the slow pace of ox carts. He was preparing to cross the dense, emerald heart of the Indian jungle with a massive caravan seeking the legendary prophets of the southern markets. Among his many beasts of burden were 2 bulls of extraordinary pedigree, but the jewel of his herd was Sanjeevaka. Sanjeevaka was a creature of indomitable spirit and immense physical presence. In the inkwash of our vision, he appears as a tower of charcoal strength, his hide shimmering with a faint golden luster under the scorching sun. His chest was as broad as a temple gate, and his eyes held a quiet, stoic nobility that even the merchant respected. He walked with a rhythmic thumping that seemed to synchronize with the heartbeat of the earth itself. As the caravan wound its way through the ancient trees, the air grew thick with the scent of crushed spices, damp earth, and the underlying metallic tang of the wild. Damanaka looked at Sanjeevaka and saw only a tool for wealth. He did not see the soul within the beast, nor did he understand that the jungle was watching, its amber eyes flickering in the shadows of the sal trees. The path narrowed. The golden dust rose in clouds, and the humid breath of the Yamuna River began to whisper of a coming change. Fate in the world of the Panchatantra is never a straight line. It is a swirl of ink that waits for a single moment of imbalance to redefine the world. As the caravan reached the banks of the mighty Yamuna, the earth itself seemed to lose its resolve. The river was a dark obsidian ribbon, its waters swirling with the secrets of the mountains. The ground here was not solid stone, but a treacherous ink-black mud, a trap laid by the monsoon rains of 1,000 years. Sanjeevaka, leading the heavy wagon of his master, stepped into a patch of earth that felt like liquid charcoal. With a sudden, sickening sound of rending earth, the bull's front leg sank deep. He struggled, his massive muscles rippling like golden waves under his skin. But the mud was a hungry, silent predator. In his desperate attempt to heave himself free, a sharp, crystalline crack echoed through the humid air. Sanjeevaka's leg had snapped. The pain was a sudden, violent heat. A flash of red ink across the charcoal darkness of the forest. The merchant Damanaka halted the caravan. He looked at his finest bull, now broken and panting in the muck. For 3 days he waited, but his greed was a restless master. He heard the distant, rhythmic growls of tigers in the night. He felt the cold breath of the forest on his neck. Eventually, the fear of losing his profit outweighed the loyalty he felt for his beast. He ordered his men to move on. He abandoned Sanjeevaka in the darkness, leaving a small amount of fodder and a promise he never intended to keep. assuming that the wild would claim the noble soul before the morning mist cleared. He chose the noise of the coins over the silence of a friend's heart. But Sanjeevaka did not die. The ink of his fate had more patterns yet to trace. Abandoned in the absolute silence of the river bank, he drew a deep, shuddering breath from the ancient air. He was a creature of indomitable will. In the following weeks, the jungle, instead of consuming him, became his healer. He fed on the lush, bioluminescent grass that grew in the shade of the sacred caves. He drank from the Yamuna, the water carrying the strength of the earth into his veins. His leg healed in the quietude of the woods. Without the burden of the merchants' wagons, his body began to transform. He grew to a divine, terrifying size. His hide became as thick as iron, and his hump rose like a mountain peak. His horns, once mere tools of labor, grew into silver scimitars that caught the moonlight. He was no longer a beast of burden. He was a god of the wild. One evening, feeling the surge of his own restored life force, Sanjeevaka stood atop a high ridge and let out a bellow. It was a sound so deep and resonant that it shook the golden leaves from the sal trees and vibrated through the very stones of the valley. It was a roar of pure existence, a golden declaration to the universe that he was alive, and that the silence of the forest now had a voice. In the heart of the great forest, Pingalaka, the Lion King, the undisputed sovereign of all four-legged creatures, was a being made of liquid gold and terrifying authority. His roar was the law, and his paws were the architects of death. Yet, at the moment Sanjeevaka's earth-shaking bellow reached his ears, the great king froze. He was standing by the cool, obsidian waters of the Yamuna, his golden mane reflecting the starlight, when the sound hit him like a physical blow. It was a sound Pingalaka had never imagined. It was deep, vibrating with the weight of the earth itself, a resonant boom that seemed to challenge the very foundations of his throne. To the lion's ears, it was not the cry of a beast, but the thunder of a superior god or a celestial demon far greater than himself. Fear that cold, slithering shadow that Pingalaka had never before hosted crept into his golden heart. He felt his blood turn to ice. In the vision of the ink Sutra, we see the lion's radiant mane beginning to flicker and dim like a dying fire struggling against a vast, hungry void. He retreated to the thickest, darkest shadows of a great cave. His eyes, now 2 points of trembling amber, paralyzed by the unknown. He stopped his hunting. He stopped his ruling. A king who had once commanded the wind was now a prisoner of a sound. Living on the periphery of the lion's palace were 2 jackals, Karataka and Damanaka. Once they had been honored ministers, their voices influential in the grand theater of the wild. But as time flowed like ink into the dark, they had been discarded, pushed into the charcoal shadows of the undergrowth, living on the meager scraps left by the king. Karataka was a creature of cautious resignation. He understood the shifting rhythms of power and was content to survive in the silence, knowing that even a small bone in the dark is better than the teeth of a predator in the light. But Damanaka was different. His spirit was a dense network of intricate golden gears, always turning, always calculating. He saw the world not as a place of survival, but as a game of masks. As he watched the Lion King sitting paralyzed in his cave, Damanaka did not feel the cold hand of fear. Instead, he felt the thrill of opportunity. He saw a gap in the divine order, a vacuum of power created by a sound. "Look at our master," Damanaka whispered to Karataka, his eyes glowing with a sharp, hungry light. "The king is afraid of a noise he cannot name. He is a shepherd who has forgotten his flock." Karataka sighed, his breath a puff of gray smoke. "Leave it be, brother. A jackal who interferes with the business of lions often ends as a meal." But Damanaka's mind was already tracing new lines in the ink. He knew that knowledge was the ultimate die, capable of turning a scavenger into a kingmaker. He decided to approach the golden throne of the cave, ready to use his words as a bridge back to authority. Living on the periphery of the lion's palace were two jackals, Karataka and Damanaka. Once they had been honored ministers, their voices influential in the grand theater of the wild. But as time flowed like ink into the dark, they had been discarded, pushed into the charcoal shadows of the undergrowth, living on the meager scraps left by the king. Karataka was a creature of cautious resignation. He understood the shifting rhythms of power and was content to survive in the silence, knowing that even a small bone in the dark is better than the teeth of a predator in the light. But Damanaka was different. His spirit was a dense network of intricate golden gears, always turning, always calculating. He saw the world not as a place of survival, but as a game of masks, As he watched the Lion King sitting paralyzed in his cave, Damanaka did not feel the cold hand of fear. Instead, he felt the thrill of opportunity. He saw a gap in the divine order, a vacuum of power created by a sound. Damanaka entered the lion's sanctuary with the slow, rhythmic gait of a diplomat. The cave smelled of damp stone and the metallic tang of unspent power. Pingalaka, trying to maintain the illusion of his majesty, sat upright, but the ink spirit shows us the golden lines of his mane were still trembling. "O King," Damanaka began, his voice a low, soothing vibration that seemed to settle the very dust of the cave. "Why does the sovereign of the forest sit in the shadows like a stag hiding from the winter wind? Why is the Yamuna thirsty for your presence, yet you remain here in the dark?" Pingalaka, desperate for a voice he could trust, confessed his terror. He spoke of the demon whose bellow had shattered his peace. Damanaka listened, his mind already weaving a web of false security. He realized that the lion was trapped in a dream of his own making, a mind too busy with what if to see what is. Damanaka offered a bargain. He would find the source of the roar, and in return he would regain his place at the king's right hand. In the vision of the Ink Sutra, we see Damanaka as a wisp of golden smoke, moving between the lion's fear and the truth of the forest. He set out into the jungle, his paws treading silently over the dry leaves, leaving behind the paralyzed throne. He was no longer a servant. He was a master of information, the most dangerous weapon in the wild. As Damanaka climbed the high, sun-drenched ridge near the river, the air became thin and crisp. Then he saw it. In the center of a wide sunbeam stood Sanjeevaka. The demon was but a massive bull, his hide a deep charcoal gray that shimmered like obsidian. He was standing peacefully, his great head lowered to graze on the bioluminescent grass, his silver horns tracing slow, rhythmic arcs in the air. Damanaka watched from the safety of a thicket. He saw the truth, the roar that had paralyzed a king was born not from malice, but from the simple vitality of a noble herbivore. For a moment, even Damanaka was struck by the sheer, uncolored honesty of the bull's presence. Sanjeevaka was a creature of the absolute present, while the Lion King was a prisoner of the past and the future. But Damanaka did not feel compassion. He felt a surge of strategic brilliance. He saw the information asymmetry, the gap between what the lion feared and what the bull was. If he could bridge this gap, he would be the one who controlled the fate of the forest. He approached Sanjeevaka with a mask of friendship, his voice taking on the quality of a sage. "O noble wanderer," he called out, "you are singing a song that has disturbed the heart of the forest. I come as a messenger from the king who wishes to know if you bring war or peace." Sanjeevaka, who had lived in the lonely mud of the riverbank, was really hungry for a connection. He saw in the jackal a mirror of his own intelligence. He spoke of his abandonment, his miraculous recovery, and his joy at being alive. Damanaka listened, absorbing every detail like a sponge soaking up ink. He didn't tell the bull about the lion's fear. Instead, he told him of the lion's respect. "The king is a shepherd of many souls," Damanaka lied, the golden lines of his words weaving a beautiful, deceptive tapestry. "He has heard your voice and recognizes a spirit equal to his own. He invites you to his cave to share the wisdom of the earth with the power of the throne." Sanjeevaka, the noble, unsuspicious bull, accepted the invitation. In the dark void of our story, we see the two silhouettes now moving back toward the cave, the clever jackal and the immense, honest bull. Behind them, the golden dust of the forest settled into the patterns of a new era. Damanaka was returning to the lion with a prize he had tamed through words. He was no longer a scavenger of scraps. He was the architect of a new brotherhood, a brotherhood built on a foundation of hidden truths and carefully crafted masks. The meeting between Pingalaka the lion and Sanjeevaka the bull was a moment where the very ink of history seemed to pause. As they stood face to face at the mouth of the great cave, the contrast was absolute. Pingalaka was a swirling corona of liquid gold, his mane radiating a heat that felt like the sun itself. Sanjeevaka was a monument of charcoal and obsidian, his massive body holding the cool, unmoving strength of the earth. For a heartbeat, the forest held its breath. The birds ceased their chatter, and even the wind stopped rustling the sow leaves. Fear, the cold shadow that had paralyzed the lion, dissolved the moment he looked into Sanjeevaka's eyes. He did not see a demon. He saw a mirror. He saw a spirit that, like his own, carried the weight of a profound and lonely nobility. Sanjeevaka, bowing his head in a gesture of sacred respect, spoke with a voice that was no longer a terrifying roar, but a deep, melodic vibration of wisdom. He spoke of the merchant's betrayal and the healing power of the Yamuna. Pingalaka, moved by the bull's honesty, stepped forward and touched his golden nose to the bull's charcoal hide. In the vision of the Ink Sutra, we see a bridge of brilliant gold weaving between them, a bond formed not from blood, but from a mutual recognition of the divine light within. They were no longer predator and prey. They were two sovereigns of the absolute present. What followed was a season of peace that the ancient forest had never known. The Lion King, once a creature of violent hunger and sharp claws, became a student of the bull. Sanjeevaka was a master of the ancient Shastras, a scholar of the laws of nature and the ethics of existence. Day after day, beneath the sprawling, golden-veined leaves of the banyan trees, the two spent their time in deep philosophical dialogue. Pingalaka found more nourishment in the bull's words than he ever had in the flesh of a stag. He learned of non-violence, of the shifting rhythms of karma, and of the profound stillness that lies beneath the roar of the ego. In the vision of the ink spirit, we see the golden Mendi patterns on the lion's skin, glowing with a new, softer light. He stopped his daily hunts. His claws grew dull from disuse, and his eyes lost the predatory fire of the hunter, becoming pools of amber meditation. They were brothers, tethered by a thread of liquid gold that illuminated the dark charcoal woods. It was a time of intellectual bliss, a sanctuary of shared wisdom, but in this perfect harmony, a dangerous imbalance was taking root. The lion was forgetting that a king who does not hunt leaves his pride in the shadows of starvation. The ripples of the lion's newfound peace traveled far beyond the cave. The entire kingdom was beginning to suffer. In the wild, the lion's kill is the bread of the periphery. The crows, the vultures, and the jackals, those who live in the charcoal shadows of the undergrowth, found themselves starving. The forest floor, usually a map of vibrant survival, became a vast void of hunger. Karataka and Damanaka, the two jackals who had engineered this union, were now the most affected. Their ribs began to trace sharp skeletal lines under their dusty fur. "Look at what we have created," Karataka sighed one evening, his breath a weak puff of gray smoke. "We brought the grass eater to the meat eater, and now the world has stopped turning. The king has become a monk, and we are but ghosts of our former selves." Damanaka, his golden gears turning with a frantic, desperate energy, watched the lion and the bull from afar. He saw the golden cords of their friendship and felt a surge of cold resentment. He had built the bridge to regain his power, but he found that the bridge was now a wall that blocked him from the center of the world. He realized that a king who is too peaceful is a king who has no need for a cunning minister. To regain his relevance, he had to destroy the very harmony he had crafted. He had to become the dyer of red ink, the architect of a new and violent separation. Damanaka's mind became a dark inkwell, swirling with the poisons of strategic envy. He sat in the darkness, watching the golden dust motes of the forest drift through the air, and he formulated the most dangerous plan of his life. He understood the psychology of trust. It is not destroyed by a single blow, but by a series of tiny, imperceptible fractures. I made them, Damanaka whispered to the charcoal shadows, and I can unmake them. He realized that the same information asymmetry he had used to build the bridge could now be used to burn it. He would use the lion's nobility against the bull, and the bull's honesty against the lion. He would weave a tapestry of signs, small, natural actions that he would reinterpret through the lens of betrayal. Karataka tried to warn him, "Brother, when a jackal tries to pull apart two mountains, it is the jackal who is crushed in the middle." But Damanaka was no longer listening. He was no longer a servant of the order. He was a master of chaos. He stood up, his thin form silhouetted against a cold, golden moon, and began his walk back toward the king's cave. He was no longer carrying a message of peace. He was carrying a drop of red ink that would eventually stain the entire forest. Damanaka entered the king's cave at the hour when the shadows are longest. Pingalaka was resting, his eyes closed in a serene meditation. He looked peaceful, almost divine. Damanaka approached, his voice a low, rhythmic vibration that felt like a secret being shared. "O King," Damanaka whispered, his eyes glowing with a sharp, artificial concern. "It breaks my heart to see you so vulnerable. I have been watching the bull, the one you call a brother. I have seen him sharpening his silver horns against the sacred stones when he thinks no one is looking. I have heard him whispering to the darkness that a king who does not hunt is a king who is waiting to be replaced." Pingalaka opened his amber eyes. For a moment, A flash of his old fire returned. "Nonsense," the king growled. "Sanjeevaka is my soul. He knows nothing of such treachery." Damanaka bowed low, a wisp of golden smoke in the dark. "A noble heart is always the easiest to deceive, my master. Watch him tomorrow. If his tail is stiff and his head is lowered as he approaches you, know that the sign of the attack is near. He is no longer your student. He is your challenger." The red ink had been dropped. The golden harmony was now laced with a thin, invisible thread of suspicion. The severing the Mitra-bheda had begun. The red ink of Damanaka's malice did not stop at the king's cave. As the golden moon began to descend, the jackal moved like a shadow through the tall grass, making his way to the lush clearing where Sanjeevaka was resting. The bull was looking up at the stars, his mind filled with the noble verses he intended to share with the lion the following morning. He was at peace, his heart a still pool of clear water. Damanaka approached with a heavy sigh, his voice trembling with a well-rehearsed grief. "O noble wanderer," the jackal whispered, "I come with a heavy heart. I have just left the presence of Pingalaka. The lion's nature has returned to its primal, violent roots. He speaks of you no longer as a brother, but as a mountain of meat. He plans to strike you down tomorrow at dawn, to feast upon the life force he once pretended to admire. Sanjeevaka, whose soul was built on the foundation of honesty, was shattered. He could not conceive of a world where a friend would lie. But why? The bull bellowed softly, his voice a low, mourning vibration. We shared the golden threads of wisdom. Was it all a mask? Damanaka bowed, his eyes sharp in the dark. A predator's mask is only removed when the prey is close enough. Watch him tomorrow at the riverbank. If his mouth is open, his tongue is licking his lips, and his body is tensed like a pulled bow, know that he is ready to consume you. The poison was complete. Both the lion and the bull were now looking at one another through a lens of blood-red suspicion. The dawn arrived, not with the promise of spring, but with the cold gray breath of a coming storm. In the vision of the ink spirit, the sky is a vast wash of charcoal and bruised purple, the golden sun struggling to break through the heavy ink of the atmosphere. The Yamuna River flowed silently, its obsidian waters carrying the weight of the forest's gathering tension. Panchatantra and Sanjeevaka met at the water's edge. They stood 10 paces apart, the space between them no longer a sanctuary of shared light, but a dark, pressurized void filled with the echoes of the jackal's whispers. The lion, his heart pounding with the fear he mistook for betrayal, looked for the signs, and there it was. Sanjeevaka, feeling the crushing anxiety of the situation, lowered his head to the ground to steady himself, and his tail grew stiff with tension. To the lion, this was the sign, the lowering of the horns for the kill. Simultaneously, the bull looked at the lion. Panchatantra, gasping for breath in the heavy, humid air, had his mouth slightly open, and in his nervousness, he licked his lips. His powerful muscles were coiled, ready for a defense he thought was necessary. To the bull, this was the sign, the predator preparing to pounce. In the ink Sutra, we see the golden cord that once bound them snap with a sound like a thunderclap. The anticipation of violence had become the reality of war. The battle that followed was a violent, tempestuous clash of two worlds. It was the fire of the lion against the earth of the bull. They lunged at one another, a blur of golden light and charcoal shadow that shook the very foundations of the riverbank. Sanjeevaka used his mountain-like hump to shove against the king, his silver horns tracing sharp, lethal arcs in the air. Pingalaka, driven by the frantic instinct to survive, lashed out with his golden claws, rending the air with a sound like the tearing of silk. The ink spirit visualizes this combat as an explosion of ink golden sparks flying from the lion's mane and charcoal dust rising from the bull's hooves, all swirling into a chaotic, dark storm. It was a tragedy of misunderstanding. Every blow they landed was fueled not by malice, but by the belief that they were defending themselves from a traitor. The forest creatures watched in a terrified silence as the two most noble beings of their world destroyed one another for a lie. Eventually, the lion, his predatory power overriding his intellectual peace, found the opening with a final agonizing roar. He struck down the bull. Sanjeevaka fell, his massive charcoal body hitting the golden dust with a sound that felt like the earth itself was breaking. As Sanjeevaka lay dying, his breath becoming a slow, rhythmic rattling against the earth, the storm finally subsided. The golden lines of the sun finally broke through the clouds, illuminating the blood of the bull, which appeared not as red, but as a deep, dark ink soaking into the golden dust. Pingalaka stood over his fallen brother, his mane dull, his body covered in wounds. In that absolute, hollow silence, the veil of Damanaka's words began to lift. He looked at Sanjeevaka's eyes. Even in death, they held no hate, only a profound, sorrowful confusion. The lion realized that the signs he had seen were merely the mirrors of his own fear. He realized that a bull who intended to kill would not have shared the sacred verses of the Shastras until the very night before. A great cry of lamentation escaped the lion's throat, a sound so hollow and filled with regret that it made the very stones of the Yamuna weep. Damanaka and Karataka watched from the bushes. Damanaka's eyes sparkled with the cold satisfaction of a strategist who has regained his place. He did not care for the grief of the king. He only cared that the competition was gone, and the king was once again dependent on his counsel. Damanaka whispered to himself that the kingdom was restored and the scavengers shall feast. But the lion knew he had lost something that no kingdom could ever replace, the only soul who truly knew him. The golden bridge was gone, leaving only a vast dark void in the heart of the forest. The ink spirit now draws a final circular line connecting the tragedy of the forest to the sanctuary of your own heart. The tale of the lion and the bull is not a story of beasts. It is a mirror for the noise we carry in our own minds. How often have we allowed a single jagged line of gossip or suspicion to cut through the golden connections of our lives? How often have we mistaken a friend's silence for distance, or their struggle for a threat? The true tragedy was not the battle, but the failure to ask a single honest question before the claws were unsheathed. But tonight, that storm is over. The lion has retreated into the ink of the past. The bull has returned to the peaceful soil. The red ink of suspicion has been washed away by the vast black ocean of the night. As you lie here, feel the golden lines of our story unraveling. The forest is dissolving into the warm, protective ink of your room. There are no Damanakas here. There are no signs to interpret. You are safe in the uncolored truth of the night. Feel your body becoming weightless, a point of golden light floating in a sea of charcoal velvet. Let the air draw in steadily through your nose. Hold it for a count of 4 and let out a long silver exhale that carries the last of the world's whispers away. The story is finished. The silence is yours. Sleep now, deep, deeper into the stillness, into the ink. Sleep